The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Morning everyone, it's James from Community Legal Centres Queensland here. Before we get too far advanced, can I just check that people out there can hear us? So if you can see a button that looks like a hand on your control panel, can you press that and we'll see your hand going up? Okay, I've only got one hand going up so far, which is not giving me a huge amount of confidence. Might ask again, can those that can hear press the button that looks like a hand on your control panel? Terrific. All right, there's a few hands going up, which suggests that at least some of you can hear us and the technology is working a bit, so let's go on with that. Thanks everyone for tuning in for another one of our webinars looking at Queensland's new Training Ombudsman. We'll commence by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we're gathered. Geoff and I are here in the Community Legal Centres Queensland office, so we'll acknowledge the Turrbal and the Yagara people as the traditional custodians of the land that we're on at the moment, but acknowledge First Australians from across the state, because we do have people from across the state tuning in to hear about Geoff's important work. So we acknowledge elders, ancestors, emerging leaders, and any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who might have tuned in today. Before I hand over to Geoff to talk about the role of the Ombudsman, I might just go through a couple of housekeeping things. We are hoping to record this webinar and make it available through our website and distribute it to you. Fingers crossed the technology works on that front. We've also distributed a copy of Geoff's PowerPoint via email earlier this morning, and you should be able to access that through the handouts area in a PDF form, through the handouts area on the control panel of your GoToWebinar. If you want to ask a question, feel free to do so. Probably best, given that we're using a webinar, to do it at the end of the session. And so there are a couple of ways that you can ask questions. You can type a question into the questions box. We'll see that pop up, and we'll either paraphrase or read out the question and Geoff will respond to it directly. The other way that you can ask a question is to press that button that looks like a hand on your control panel. We'll see a hand go up at our end, we'll unmute your microphone, and everyone will be able to hear you ask your question and we'll respond to it that way. As I said, it might be best if you can hold those questions over to the end. So into the substance of what we're talking about, from time to time community legal centres have people come in. There might be students, trainees, apprentices who are having some issues with training providers, and Queensland now has a really great office and tool to respond to some of the issues that they've got, and that's the Office of the Training Ombudsman. Geoff Favell is an experienced education and IR government official, and he's been acting in that role for almost 12 months, and they're doing some amazing work, and really excited to have Geoff here to explain to us what they're doing, and particularly how community legal centres that might be seeing clients walk through the door with these kind of issues can work with Geoff and his office to get their issues resolved. So Geoff, thank you very much for the presentation. Look forward to hearing from you, and over to you.
Look, thanks for that. I guess I'll just run through a quick presentation, which is one we've been delivering to stakeholders across Queensland. And I guess that first little picture of someone scratching their head is there for a reason. The Queensland Training Ombudsman is not just about investigating complaints, but it's also about helping people navigate what is a very complex, and most would argue overly complex, system of training that people have struggle navigating. The first point we make to people is that if we're serious about a system that helps us link individual aspirations with the opportunities that are created by employers, industry and communities, then that can only happen if the VET system is regarded as high quality. And that's about addressing quality concerns or perceptions of quality, and that everyone has a role to play in that. And this presentation starts right back from the basics as to what is quality. This is not about the Australian Skills Quality Authority, but it's just about a general term of quality. So if you look at a couple of definitions of quality, the first one is meeting or exceeding customer expectations from an engineering firm. A dictionary definition is the degree of excellence of a thing. And there's one from Martin Luther King, which is quite relevant to the vet sector, but it says, at times you've got to reconsider your definitions and don't judge things on the size of salaries or the size of your fleet. For the vet sector, perhaps you could argue that's where government policy went wrong many years ago, when it was about the proportion of the population that has a Certificate 3, as opposed to providing people with the vocational skills they need to do the jobs that are available. The message we're providing to people is, if you're interested to know what the definition the Office of the Training Ombudsman is using, it's the first one. It's if you're offering X to a student and you're delivering Y, or to an employer, then that's a reason for someone to raise an issue with us, and we will investigate those concerns. From there, if we talk about if that is quality, then who's responsible for quality in the vet sector in Queensland? And the message is for everyone that it's all stakeholders. This morning I was at a breakfast forum with about 70 employers in the security industry. We're currently doing a review into training in the security industry, and that was a clear message to them. This is not about the Office of Fair Trading, who manages their licence, being solely responsible, nor is it about ASCL being responsible. In actual fact, employers play a critical role in driving the quality of the vet sector. And I guess what we're saying before, just to reiterate what I said earlier, that is in everyone's interest that poor quality and perceptions of poor quality are adequately addressed. But it is the shared responsibility for quality that makes it confusing and complex for people to navigate. And our office, as I said early on, is there to help people navigate that overly complex system. So these are our functions. They were straight out of our charter from when we were established, but certainly are now within the Further Education and Training Act. So we receive and where appropriate investigate complaints about vet, and I'll go through some of our work to date shortly with you. We acknowledge that there's many agencies that play in this space about regulation of vet. So we have established partnerships with all other agencies. We have memorandums of understanding with the ACPET, the Australian Council for Private Education and Training Providers, with Construction Skills Queensland that funds training in the marketplace, with the Group Training Association, with the Office of Fair Trading, with DET, Department of Education and Training in Queensland, with the Commonwealth Government. We're in the throes of finalising an arrangement with them, because we are dealing with complaints around vet fee help. So we are working with every agency, and part of that is about making sure that we do provide a seamless service to clients. And of course, we also have a very good partnership with the Queensland Ombudsman's office as well. So we make recommendations to the Director-General in relation to complaints. If anyone was really bored one day and watched the debate in Parliament when this legislation went through, there was a big debate around whether the actual role was a toothless tiger or not. What I say to people is that, if you think that, you just got to look at these things here. So, recommendations to the Director-General. So if you're an organisation out there in the vet space, even if you're delivering vet fee help, there's a very good chance you're also getting state funding for something that you do. So I can make a recommendation to the Director-General to terminate contract arrangements with an RTO if that was what was seen necessary, or to implement some sanction against that RTO. I think this is an important one as well. So it's not just about dealing with those complaints, it's dealing with systemic issues out of those complaints and making policy recommendations to the Minister. So not just saying, well, this is an issue, it's about trying to have a process to sort that out. We've recently completed an investigation into the training of electrical apprentices, and that came directly out of a coroner's report into the death of a construction worker in central Queensland in 2012. We've made a number of recommendations to the Minister, who has endorsed the report, provided that to the Department of Education and Training, and from 1st of October there will be some differences to the way apprentice electricians are trained in Queensland, which is quite positive from our point of view. And as I said there before, this is not just about saying here's an issue. It's about providing the Minister with strategies to deal with those issues and move forward to strengthen the vet sector in Queensland. One here that we haven't really touched on much at the moment, but we do have the ability to undertake or promote reviews or research, so expect to see that come into play in the near future in terms of a review of the overall quality mechanisms in the market. This is just a general one that the Minister can direct the Ombudsman to do a certain task. And we also have a role to promote the quality of vet delivery in Queensland. So much is happening in the media at the moment around how poor the vet sector is performing. To quote the Chief Commissioner from the Australian Skills Quality Authority, all of those stories relate to the activities of 30 RTOs out of 4,600 registered nationally. So there's a lot of good news stories in the vet space as well, and part of the Training Ombudsman role will be to try and get some of those good news stories out and hopefully over time take some of the bad news stories off the front page for a little while, albeit some of the ones that have been on there recently deserve to be there, there's no doubt about that. So in a nutshell, that's sort of what our role and functions are. We have a very small office. There's myself, a principal investigator, an investigator and an office manager. But we do have capacity to change that depending on the demand for our services. So an update on the establishment. So I was appointed as Interim Training Ombudsman on the 14th of September 2015 and operated under a ministerial charter from that point. On the 25th of February, legislation to create the role of Training Ombudsman was considered by Parliament and it was proclaimed on the 22nd of April 2016. So we are operating under the provisions of the Further Education and Training Act now. The government has commenced the process to fill the position of Training Ombudsman on a permanent basis, and that process is part way through. I'll just give you a quick snapshot of the sort of things that we've been dealing with, and this is probably of more interest to you than that overall background, but this is where I see that we can work closely together to help people who visit your offices. So that's our complaints so far. So if I compare it to the former Training Ombudsman's office that existed up to 2012, that office really only dealt with the complaints about apprenticeships and traineeships. We are dealing with complaints right across the vet space, and as you can see there, to date, 267 complaints already, 59 formal inquiries. Never sure whether inquiries are the right name there, but there are people who are coming to us with issues but not really complaining about someone, just wanting some clear advice or direction on a particular point of view. The types of issues we're dealing with, as you can see there, the majority of them at the moment are vet fee help. They were fairly low for a while, but with the 30 June passing recently and people getting tax statements where they owed money that they didn't think they owed, that has led to an increase in those complaints. Surprisingly, the second point down, which is fee for service activity, where it's listed as RTO matter including fee for service. That one surprises me because I would have thought that's where the system was probably working best. In other words, an individual's parting with their own cold hard cash, and you would hope that they're negotiating what they want to buy and how they want it delivered and picking an RTO that can do that. We're finding many, many cases where that really isn't the case. So, and they're probably the sort of people you guys see on a regular basis, I'm presuming. So really as a breakdown, that's where it is. The 17 other relate to other stakeholders in the system, whether it be about the services provided by an Australian Apprenticeship Support Network provider or disability employment services. They're the sort of things we capture in the other lot down there. As for the type of industry sectors that we're covering, not overly surprising that community services is the biggest one, given it's the largest employer of labour in Queensland and certainly where most of the vet activity is at the moment. But I will say it grew really, really quickly from about 40 to 66, and a lot of that is to do with changes to the diploma qualification and vet fee help arrangements, which have left people either completing or not completing an old qualification with no process to move on to the new one unless they enter into another $17,000 vet fee help debt. So we are working with the Commonwealth Government around those at the moment. But other than that, generally you would expect that breakdown of the complaints based on the fact that most of our complaints are vet fee help, community services and business are the two biggest ones in that space as well. Regionally, and we just track this to see if our message is getting out beyond South East Queensland. We're obviously a service that delivers right across the state, and I've delivered similar presentations to this right across the state to key stakeholders in the vet space. No surprise, Metro, North Coast, South Coast are where the most of the issues are, but certainly we are getting complaints from right across Queensland, and we encourage that to continue, particularly in terms of how we identify systemic issues for the Minister. This shows the growth in complaints, which is interesting. So the former Training Ombudsman did about 40 complaints a year. We expected we would probably get about 20 a month. You can see up until January this year, it was around that figure, but we hadn't done much promotion of the role until that time. As we've promoted the role and sent information out to stakeholders, you can see it's continuing to grow, and on average we're sort of getting around that 35 complaints a month, and that is useful. If you couple that with the fact that we've done the electrical review, there's an issue out there now about the wages arrangements and the industrial relations arrangements that apply to apprentices at group training companies. We're working with the department on that, and I've been requested by the Minister to undertake this review of training and assessment for the security industry. We certainly have plenty to keep us busy, but certainly I haven't sort of had too much interaction with organisations like yourself. There's been some ad hoc discussions, but I'd certainly encourage that we've got some brochures here that we can send out to your centres. I'm more than happy for you to provide them to individuals. More than happy for you to refer them directly to us, for you to ring and have a chat about whether we can do anything for an individual. I was sort of mentioning here before that one of the benefits of the complaints that we've done is that use of the term Training Ombudsman. So once you say Ombudsman, we do get a genuine response from stakeholders. And when I say stakeholders, we are not a student advocate, we're an advocate for all vet stakeholders. So about 70% of our complaints are from students, 30% are from employers, other stakeholders, RTOs, registered training organisations wanting to whinge about other RTOs. So we're getting a really good mix of the complaints and issues as well. So if it's generally something to do with vet or close enough there too, we're happy to have a look at it and to make contact with organisations to try and resolve matters. This is a fairly short presentation, which is normally followed by a range of questions, but this is really the final slide. I found this cartoon, it probably says more about my weird sense of humour than anything else, but I found this cartoon when I first started relieving in the role. And I guess the important part is I say to people, if you look at that box of pills down the bottom with Ombudsman written on it, we hope that everyone treats our involvement in something like a packet of Panadol, and that pain goes away really, really quickly and everyone moves on happy. Alternatively, stakeholders could take the option to treat it like something totally different and it's going to be uncomfortable for a little while. And the reality is that all stakeholders have welcomed the addition of this Training Ombudsman with a much broader role than the former one that ceased to exist in 2012. We have, at this stage, resulted in about $185,000 of student fees being recovered from the complaints that we've investigated. 60% of the complaints are finalised within 28 days, and it'll be about 98% of them are finalised within 3 months. So we are working hard to provide a quick service to all stakeholders in the system to have their matters resolved. And finally, that's our contact details, and as I said, I'm more than happy for anyone to contact our office at any time for any client or potential client that you're dealing with, or just any issues that you're uncovering. We have had some conversations with a couple of entities about whether QCAT can actually deal with these type of issues, and there seems to be a little bit of a, I guess, doubt around whether they can or will. I will say we've got a couple that are floating through the surface with through the QCAT system at the moment that we hope get to some finality and provide all of us with some clarity around the role of QCAT in those sort of matters moving forward. But at this space it still is a wait and see, but we've certainly had discussions with QCAT, and we at times do refer organisations to QCAT if we haven't been able to sort the matter out. So that really is, as I said, a very short snapshot of what we're doing and what we've done to date. And I hope I haven't bored you to death, but happy to answer any questions, or either now or through later discussions with yourselves or the organisations that you represent.
Thanks, Geoff. That was a great oversight of what the office is doing. A reminder, folks, there are a couple of ways you can ask questions. You can type a question into the questions box, or you can press that button that looks like a hand on your control panel. Geoff, when someone walks into a community legal centre and says, I feel as though I've been poorly treated by my vet service provider, by my private training college or whatever they call it, and a volunteer or a staff member in a CLC says, terrible to hear, but there's this great office that can help you. It's the Queensland Training Ombudsman. This is what you can expect when you contact them. what would that conversation look like? What would we be telling that person that they can expect in terms of the interaction that they have should they reach out to your office?
Yeah, look, certainly there is an online complaints form that that your organisations could help individuals fill out and send to us. We would say to individuals, we provide an independent, impartial and free service to anyone to try and resolve their issues. And as I've sort of mentioned today, we're not limited to matters where Queensland Government funds training. It's about anything to do with vet, including vet fee help. And look, we'll get to a point towards the end where we may not be able to affect a resolution, but we will work out if we do have to refer someone to the Commonwealth Government because it's a vet fee help matter. We will have a conversation with the Commonwealth Government before we do that. And the other stat, just to throw out there, is that of all the complaints we've completed so far, we've got the complainant's desired outcome in 83% of those cases. So not all of them are about money. Some of them are about this is behaviour that the RTO is displaying. We don't think it's good enough. And we will contact the RTO, discuss the issues with them. They will implement some revised process and the student goes beauty and they go back to study happily and move on to finish their qualifications. So yeah, it is a personalised, independent, free and impartial view of the circumstances relating to that particular issue. Oh, yeah, the question then was just asked about how we interact with overseas students, international students studying in Queensland. We don't have a role with international students. They should be directed to the Overseas Student Ombudsman, which is part of the Commonwealth Ombudsman's office, based in the same building that I'm in Brisbane, but it's within their remit. So if they're international students, the Overseas Student Ombudsman is the point of contact. There is one RTO in Queensland that isn't covered by the Overseas Student Ombudsman requirements because of their ownership structure, and that's a company called Aviation Australia. So if it's an international student with Aviation Australia, happy enough for you to forward them directly to me because we have been working closely with them rather than just saying, sorry, we can't help you, that we will investigate those matters. And what we do, we work with the Overseas Student Ombudsman so that we investigate them using the same process, the same procedures and same manner that they do, so that if the student is then later engaged with another RTO, they expect the same sort of service.
Geoff, again, you might want to paraphrase. Could you give a couple of kind of de-identified case studies or examples of the types of scenarios that people are coming to you with?
Yes, so a couple of scenarios of the type of complaints that we are dealing with. So one that sticks in my mind is really a distraught father rings the office at about 4 o'clock one Friday afternoon, and he is pretty much at his wit's end. The student had responded to a Facebook ad, had agreed to do some training. There was a 5-day cooling off period. This was on the Thursday. I think on the Tuesday then they've rang up and said, yep, I don't want to do it. And the RTO has said, did you read the stuff we sent you? The student has said yes. And they said, we didn't read the fact that the 5-day period includes Saturday and Sunday. So it was bad luck. The father had got legal advice, had went to the Office of Fair Trading, nothing we can do. With that particular case, I made contact with the CEO of that registered training organisation and said, look, pretty much you may be legally right, but morally I think you've got a problem here. You're burdening this young person with a debt for actually doing nothing. The father's agreed that he would pay a small amount of an administrative payment to you because you processed the enrolment, but doesn't believe that his daughter should be encumbered with the debt for the rest of the time. And the CEO of the organisation, so once you get below the people who are dealing with these individuals, the CEO was absolutely reasonable and resolved this matter within about 2 days, much to the satisfaction of the father. Other matters, so sometimes we get involved in matters that are a little bit outside of accredited vocational education and training. We've had one where someone did a course with a photography studio, thought they were doing a vet course, but they weren't, and the organisation wasn't an RTO, and then wasn't able to finish the course for a number of reasons. We worked with that organisation and the individual and brokered a solution that both parties were happy with and were able to move on with. From apprentices, we've dealt with a couple of issues where apprenticeship contracts have been cancelled, and people have not been happy with the cancellation of the apprenticeship, so we review them. On a couple of occasions we've requested that the Department of Education and Training review their decision to cancel the training contract, and they have been overturned and apprentices have been able to continue working. So a lot of our complaints do resolve either around the, I'm owed some money, and I would say vet fee help is where that becomes the most problematic, because under the terms and conditions that they sign up to, once they pass that census date, they're due the full debt. What we've been able to do as part of that is have some negotiations with RTOs where at least part of the debt might be remitted, and everyone's happy with that moving forward. But the reality is, if the RTO says no and the student is actually hasn't followed the process to withdraw from the course, they probably are due the debt, and that's a big blight on the system at the moment. That I think there's a lot of public media around that says it's poor program design, and it would appear that that may well be the case, although the federal government has implemented some significant changes to vet fee help over the last 6 months to address those issues.
Thanks, Geoff. Last chance, folks, to type in a question into the questions box, or press that button that looks like a hand on your control panel. Not seeing many questions come through at the moment. I stand corrected. Apprentices made redundant at the end of the training period okay, I'm going to expand on your question because I think it's a good one. Where an apprentice or a trainee is made redundant at the end of their training period, where that might conflict with employment law expectations or standards, including NES and those kind of things, do you have any jurisdiction or any role to play there, Geoff?
Not really a role to play with that, but I think the issue is from training and employment arrangements linked to apprenticeship for a period of time now, they've been trying to be separated. The issue is that when a person signs onto a training contract, it is only for that 4-year period, and there was no obligation unless there was some other arrangement for an individual to continue on beyond the end of that apprenticeship. Good employers, however, employ quality apprentices and keep on their workforce forever and a day, but when those situations arise, more than happy to talk to the individual through those issues, but and work with the department and work with Fair Work Australia about how the person can best address their concerns at that time.
There's a question about whether a national ombudsman might be needed to better deal with vet fee help issues that fall outside your jurisdiction.
Yes, so the question about whether a national ombudsman is needed to better deal with vet fee help issues. Look, there is a lot of debate nationally about whether there is a need for a national training ombudsman. I can tell you that several state jurisdictions are now looking at it. I think the issue with vet is, my personal view on that, is that that's an issue to be dealt with when we get some clarity about Commonwealth versus state responsibilities with regarding vet, because if you have a national vet fee help ombudsman, you're only going to deal with the narrow vet fee help complaint and not the state subsidised complaint or apprenticeship matters, and they would have to have a good arrangement with the states to investigate those complaints, just like I'm having to have one with the Commonwealth. So I think longer term there is definitely a need for that, but any decision on that should wait until such time as the jurisdictional debate over vocational education and training is sorted out at the national and state level.
Geoff, the previous question talked about kind of interplay between Fair Work jurisdiction and your own jurisdiction, and we've had some clarification from the questioner there. What about if it doesn't fall into Fair Work's jurisdiction, but it's actually with the Queensland Industrial Relations Commissioner and the Queensland
Yeah, we work closely with the Office of Industrial Relations and where needed, the Queensland Industrial Relations Commission, although the majority of our issues don't end up there now because of the modern award structure and the state's referral of powers to the Commonwealth. But certainly, we can help people, as I said, navigate that system to the Queensland Industrial Relations Commission, depending on the nature of the issue involved, so we're difficult one to answer, but we're happy for any of those things to be pushed our way, and we're happy to work with them or yourselves to work out the best way to deal with an issue.
When you say them or ourselves, are you and your staff happy to speak to us as representatives on a no-name basis, kind of a secondary consultation
more than happy to speak to you on a no-name basis about any issues that that you're coming across.
There's a question about whether you think, and I don't know if this is an appropriate, I'll let you choose to dodge the question if you think that's appropriate, Geoff. Do you think that you need powers to make determinations, or in your current practice of negotiating and the lack of very strong enforcement powers in your office, do you think that that's okay at the moment, or do you think you do need stronger power to make determinations?
Look, the power to make determinations, I think, is one, as I said, that has been debated right from the start. When I first went into this role, I was probably a little bit, maybe, but I mean, after 12 months in the role, I think that we are able to effect good resolutions with our current environment. We do have provisions under the Act to force an individual to provide us with documentation and to attend a meeting in certain circumstances. So we do have those provisions there. We also, so for example, with the MOU we have with the Australian Council for Private Education and Training Providers, is pretty much along the line that if we make a decision about a complaint that involves one of their members, they will work with their member to actually implement the recommendations we make to resolve the complaint. So, in short, I think what we've got now is sufficient. I'm sure it's something that's going to need to be reviewed in a couple of years' time, though.
That, I think, is all of the questions that have come through. So thanks to, well, particularly to Geoff on behalf of the people who are clapping and cheering wildly at their computer screens across Queensland. It's a really valuable addition to the framework around this space. Thanks to everyone that tuned in to find out more about Geoff and the work of the office, and for the continuing work that you're doing. We'll circulate a copy of Geoff's presentation and hopefully a recording of it, subject to the technology working for us, as I flagged earlier on. Geoff's also left some resources here in terms of some flyers and some of those kind of things. So if you're interested in that, maybe get in touch either with us or the office directly through the contact details on your screen. Okay. Terrific. So Geoff's just given us his direct phone number for any CLC workers to contact him around this stuff. We'll include that in our follow-up email in the next little while so that people can get in touch directly. Clients or potential complainants should use that 1-800 number though. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll look forward to speaking to you soon. Bye-bye.